Hi, everyone. If you can hear me, can you please type in your name and your location by way of introduction? Great. And if you'll give me just 1 minute, I'm going to just so that you can see the other fellows. Great. So if you're just joining us now, please go ahead and type in your name and location by way of introduction, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Let's just wait for some more folks to join us. Sheila, can you hear me okay? Okay. And you should also feel free to unmute your
Can you hear me?
Your phones so that folks can say hello to you as well.
Hi.
Yeah, I can. Hi. Great. So we still have a couple of folks scheduled to join us, so we'll just take a few minutes to wait for them. And we'll get started in just a minute or two. If you're just joining us again, please go ahead and type in your name and your location to let us know where you're coming. We're excited to have you on here. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to get us started, and you folks will join us as they do. So welcome, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you so much for joining us for this informational webinar about the Generative Fellowship. My name is Poonam Dreyfus-Pai. I'm manager at Coraline, And so that means that I run the programs, but I also am largely involved in supporting the fellows as they do their work. So I'm very excited to have two fellows on here with me. We have Mimi Spalding and Leela Arnaud, and I'm going to let them just take a minute to introduce themselves.
All right, can you hear me? I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my name is Mimi Spalding, and I am originally from Arizona, but I currently live in College Park, Maryland, a suburb of DC, basically, and I work here as well.
And I am Leela Arnaud. Sorry, Prina. I'm Leela Arnaud, and I'm based in Louisiana, but I'm currently talking to you guys from Miami, Florida.
Thank you both so much. So just so everyone knows a little bit about the technology we're using today, you'll see that I'm typing from a name, Chelsea Sims. That's a person who works at Answer. We share this particular media technology with them. So it's me. If you see someone named Chelsea typing, it's them. And that's also just the same for the name that's under my face. That's not my name. So thanks for bearing with me on that. And then second of all, we're just going to have folks type in questions as they come. So if you have a question at some point, we will be sure to stop and address it. There will also be time for questions for the fellows and me at the end of the webinar. So please, let us know what your thoughts are as they come, and we will be sure to address them over the course of the next hour. So I'm just going to jump right in and tell you a little bit about how we came to do this work. Coraline, some of you may already know this. For those of you who don't, Coraline is a movement-building initiative. We are deeply committed to fostering a culture of innovation, collaboration, and impact within the reproductive health rights and justice movement. And our hope is that in doing so, we will win back to reproductive rights and respect for all people's sexual and reproductive lives. And we do this because we feel like in order to win reproductive rights and respect, there is an important leadership development component that is necessary. And that leadership development comes from both the different regional organizing events that we do with our field organizers across the country, most notably Oklahoma and Tennessee, through our fellowships, and also through the development of the 30-year strategy for the movement. We feel like those programs work together to create this culture change. That's what we do. The Generative Fellowship came about in 2013 with our very first cohort, but it came after several years of recognizing that there was anti-choice legislation being introduced in alarmingly high numbers, and also legislation that was curbing people's ability to self-determine themselves and their decisions related to sexual and reproductive health rights and justice that were aside from abortion, right? That was happening frequently. Oh, I'm having trouble hearing. It sounds muffled. Okay, let me turn up the volume on my end and see if that helps. Does that help, folks? Okay, great. I apologize if my volume is just a little low again. Great. So the legislation that was being passed and the programs and policies that were being instituted were anti-choice, but also preventing people from parenting, preventing people from making decisions about their bodies, preventing people from self-determining and having and exercising autonomy over their lives. So we created this policy because we felt like our movement had no long-term effective response. Wow, it's really that bad, huh? Is that better? Is that better for folks? Okay, so if you can excuse the fact that I'll be holding my phone right up to my face, this is how I'll do it so that everyone can hear me. Okay, great. So again, we are offering this fellowship because we felt like our movement, the reproductive health rights and justice movement, has had no effective response to the alarming and regressive policies, programs, and institutions that are being set up. And we really wanted to give people the space to try things out differently, to do things in ways that maybe haven't been done yet. And so we talk a lot about innovation in the world of Coraline, and we recognize this is a very jargony word. You know, it means a lot of different things, but most people can't define it. A lot of people look at it as something like I can tell you what it is when I see it, and I'll know it when I see it, but I can't actually define the word innovation. So for our purposes, we say that it is not a singular idea or a technology or an event. It's actually a process and a practice. And innovation is a way for folks to do things differently and to do different things, right? It's a process that allows people to do that. And it's a process that's actually quite rigorous. It takes into account feedback from multiple perspectives at multiple points in the process. And for Coraline, our investment is not in one innovative solution or several innovative solutions. It's about developing the competency and the capacity for innovation in our leaders, right? So for us, it's an investment in our leaders and not in specific ideas only. So with that in mind, our goal for the movement is to create, support, and nurture a network and a community of innovative leaders and to develop this culture of innovation, collaboration, and impact within the movement. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to assume no because I haven't seen anything being typed. But if you do have questions, if any of this feels unclear or unfamiliar, please don't hesitate to stop me. Great. So goals of the fellowship, the Generative Fellowship, are to increase our leaders' ability to think outside of the box, right? To really think about what it means to do things differently and to do different things, to really explore new ways of doing and new ways of thinking. We hope to create a shared language and culture and practice around innovation. So giving people these tools is important, but giving them these tools in a community allows them to reach out to others for support and continue to exercise those muscles with people who understand what the concepts are. And of course, we are interested in turning the tide on anti-choice legislation and turning the tide on regressive reproductive justice action in general, right? We really want people to have the resources, rights, and respect to thrive. So we support the development of these new strategies, tactics, programs, and concepts. So I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction to design thinking, which is the methodology of innovation that we use. It has three components. There's the research element, the resilience element, and the relating element. So the research is really how we approach problem solving. It's a way of working on an idea that breaks down the process in different stages and helps us get more information and feedback to refine it. And really, it's just a model for how we might experiment thoughtfully. So in our movement, there is sometimes a resistance to trying many different things and seeing what sticks because there is a deep, deep fear of failure. And what we know from doing this is that there are ways to fail in big ways and there are ways to fail in small ways. But the important thing about failure is that we learn from it and we do things differently moving forward. And so this is a framework that we give to our fellows to help them think about how they might practice, experience failure, learn from it, and try something new. And with that comes resilience because, again, we don't have a lot of capacity in our movement for failure, and so we don't develop resilience, and we don't expect people to develop resilience, which is the ability to bounce back on purpose, right, and bounce back to your purpose. So we want people to have the flexibility and the adaptability to experience failure and come back sort of renewed and with energy for moving forward. And then finally, the last component is relating. We want you both to relate to the people with whom you're trying to work with and with whom you're trying to engage. So again, when we think about who, we're talking about the people who might benefit from the innovative idea that you're proposing in your application, the people that you're trying to work with when you're talking about the idea that you're proposing. So we really want you to understand what it means to relate to them or to connect with them. But we also think about relating, again, from this network building perspective of building and creating projects require support. And so fellows will have support from their peers and the folks in their cohort, the folks in previous cohorts, and of course the Coraline staff and community. So any questions about this model? Can everyone still hear me okay? Okay, great. Great. Good, glad to hear it. Okay, so now I think you've heard from me enough for a little bit. I'm going to turn it over to both Leela and Mimi, and I'm going to ask them to share a little bit about their experience. They're currently in the Firebrand cohort, which is our current and Generative Fellows cohort. They're catching them right in the middle of their experience. Do either of you want to go first? Do you have a preference? Okay, then we'll start with Leela. We'll just do it alphabetically. And it would be great if you could just tell us about your Generative Fellowship experience thus far, and then Mimi, I'll ask you the same question.
Okay. Poonam, do you mind if I wrote down like a jot of notes that I wanted to share with people? Can I just go through this? Or should I wait for your individual questions?
No, that's fine. If there are things specifically you'd like to share, that's fine. But I will also let everyone know that they can type questions that both Leela and Mimi can answer during their presentations and afterwards. Does that also work for you, Mimi? Okay, great. Then that works for me, Leela. Go ahead.
So first, I want to start out with like vulnerability, because that's what I've been learning through Coraline, is that it's important to just be vulnerable through this process. And open and honest. And so I will say that this is the first day that I've sat down to think about my work in a minute. Everything has changed in my life, in my personal life, since I started the Coraline Fellowship. And so, like my mom says, man plans, but God determines. And I'm really just living this out right now. My old self would have been stressing about my work and feeling like a failure about where my project is at. But it's been amazing how this process, Coraline, you really start out with this permission to fail, and I really needed that in order for me to just look at my project and keep moving forward with it. So I'm glad that Coraline has given me a process for working through the kinks and a space to think smart with no obligation to a set outcome. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I'm a sexuality educator, facilitator, a trainer. But then my other roles, the ones that I'm seeing come out more prominently right now, are my role as a doula, as a daughter, as a dreamer, to think about my project through and I've been encouraged, I think, just because I'm so far from my profession, a professional field here in Miami, to think about my project through those perspectives. So that's one observation that I have about where I'm at in the process. The problem that I'm trying to solve, or at least initially was trying to solve, was to look at the way that evidence-based programming has gaps. As a sexuality educator, I believe that there are gaps in culturally sensitive and competent education that's holistic and includes race, historical, and media analysis that apply to the reality of young women of color. And so initially my project was to create a safe space and a persona as a facilitator where I could explore sexuality with my audience through a lens of my own individual perspective as a young woman of color, but also through a futuristic perspective on sexuality where women of color are not limited to the isms of our day and can talk about themselves as sexual beings positively and from a place of power. And where sex ed is a safe space that allows women to work through societal and family expectations, pressures, history, cycles, and karma. And so I started this whole thing out imagining a future in sex ed that is not limited just by disease prevention and evidence-based programming. So with all of that said, well, let me backtrack. The process, Coraline has given me an awesome process. And so we started this out with empathy interviews. And I was in Louisiana back back then. But the process of taking empathy interviews allowed me an opportunity to learn about what professionals in my field, moms, friends, think about what my idea was, and how it applied to their reality. And one of the major themes that came out of my empathy interviews was, women were just, it kept coming up where I interviewed friends, and this theme of reconciling our roles as women, and as mothers, partners, as women, as sexual beings, um, just kind of would always come up. And this idea of our relationships to ourselves, to our partners, to our children, and to our parents, and how we just see that working out in our everyday lives. And I didn't really know what to do with that. It just didn't really. I knew that it was something really important. I knew that it was something that really was very relevant to me as a young woman of color when talking about sexuality education and talking about how I have raised my awareness and my consciousness around my sexuality that have allowed me to be more positive about my sexuality. But I didn't really know what to do with it. And so this is where I'm at right now. I came to Miami because my mom is very sick. And she had a stroke, she has MRI scans. Turns out that she has a tumor in her brain. And it feels like I'm living out this theme on a day to day. So her role as mom and my role as daughter have just become this, just what I live and what I breathe. My role as her caretaker, and that's where the doula perspective comes in, has been really, that's really where I'm at. And I'm glad that I had, and superimpose the layer of managing the healthcare system and insurances and prescriptions. And she's a low-income single woman who is not on a 401k, has just been overwhelming. And I think that I am the audience, and my family is the audience for which I have always looked to work with and serve in my profession. And for whatever reason, the universe has really gone back full circle and allowed me to come back home and look at my work within our own family life. So I'm really glad that Coraline has given me the permission to fail, quote unquote, and go back to the drawing board. I'm seeing my project from a completely new lens, and I say new, but it's really my old lens as a young woman of color who came from the ghetto and is back here with my family. And I see healthcare, I see Obamacare, I see all of these things that we tell our people to try to navigate and try to understand, and just working through that personally. So it's teaching me empathy. It's teaching me how to relate my work to what's going on in my life. It's making my work personal, and it's reminding me of why I went into this work to begin with. I'm glad that Coraline has given me a process and a network of other activists that I can reach out to. I will also say that I started this process as an independent. I didn't work through an organization, and it's one of my core values to do this work as an independent contractor. And so linking up with other independent activists was also really important, and activists who are doing this work through organizations has also been a big part of this for me. So right now, I think that my practice involves looking at this problem from multiple perspectives, and it's challenging me to get creative about receiving feedback from my new network here in Miami, and staying open to where I go from here. So I think that's all I have to say for now. If you have any questions, feel free.
Can't hear you. Poonam, I think you're on mute.
How about now? Okay, let me.
Oh, yeah.
Is that better now? Okay, great. So I just wanted to thank you, Leela, for sharing, again, the story of your project, but also sharing the story of you. That's really powerful and meaningful, and it's appreciated. Thank you. Mimi, do you want to share? Would you like to be prepared?
Sure, you can ask me questions, I guess, but I can just start by giving kind of, the first question that you asked was or you were thinking about asking is talking about my fellowship experience thus far. And I wanted to thank Leela as well because I feel like our projects are very complementary. We have a lot in common. So I would say that, and she also said a lot of the things that I wanted to say, so you must have read my mind, but my experience thus far in the fellowship has really been quite transformative and very liberating because, as Leela said, Coraline really kind of allows us to fail. And as Poonam was mentioning, often in our movement, there is a fear of failure, which I think inhibits people from thinking creatively and testing out new things. And so that can often be very constricting. So Coraline was just completely different, and it was really liberating to be able to think about innovation and approach it in different ways, and to know that it's okay to fail because often through failure you'll emerge much wiser or in a different place than you might have began, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad place. So yeah, so the learning about innovation as a process and a practice has been really, really powerful to me, as well as the opportunity to have support throughout the entire fellowship. So that includes support from other fellows, from previous cohorts of fellows, and even from like our trainers, for lack of a better word, from Poonam, etc. So that has all been contributed to my positive experience. So I know the question answer thing is a little weird, but so just to talk a little bit about my project. So I have a background in maternal health, and I'm also a lawyer. So I have my master's in public health with a focus on maternal and child health. And that area has always been kind of my passion. And I've sought to make any of the work that I've done kind of improve health outcomes for women, especially low-income women of color. Because as many of you might know on here, the maternal mortality rate for Black women is absurdly high, and it hasn't seen any improvements over the last several decades. And it always confounds me why this is in the United States, where we have such a wonderful, amazing, expensive healthcare system. So I also sought, so I was basically inspired by a personal experience of my sister, who sorry, I was looking at the notes, but she several years ago, almost 3 years ago, she unexpectedly found out that she was pregnant. And unfortunately, at the time, she was one of those individuals that made too much to qualify for Medicaid, but made too little to afford private health insurance. So for several years before, she had gone without health insurance. She just made do without it. So when she became pregnant, she went through the process of trying to figure out how she could afford health coverage, and that actually delayed her from getting prenatal care for several months. And then when she finally was able to get insurance coverage through Medicaid, it was because she had to reduce her hours at work in order to qualify. So that was a really stressful time, and I was kind of angry at the time that our health system works in that way, and that people like my sister and other people have to go without health coverage. So that was kind of the inception of my project idea, but it was furthered after my sister had my nephew, Aaron, and he has several healthcare needs. And we found, or it was my sister realized that she felt often that she received care that wasn't necessarily the standard of care. And it was kind of unfair, and we couldn't help but think that the cause of it was because she's a low-income woman of color who has Medicaid coverage. So, for example, it took 3 months for one of her doctors to read an MRI and give her the results of it for my nephew. And so, for any of you on here that are in the health professions, you'll know that it shouldn't take that long to, read MRI results. Also, there was another time when my sister kept making repeated calls to get results for Aaron's genetic testing that was done. And she called every day for several weeks and she never got a return call. So I figured that my project would be kind of basically the question that I entered with was how do we improve quality of care that low-income women of color receive, especially surrounding maternal health care, so prenatal, postnatal care. But through the fellowship and through learning about design thinking, I remember that one moment in particular at our retreat was extremely powerful for me. And it was when we were in our small groups and we were doing brainstorming exercises. And one of the exercises is to take a whole bunch of Post-it notes and just kind of write your first ideas that come to mind, and then kind of just everyone post them on the wall. And then you go through it and figure out common themes. So in my group, we realized that one of the most common themes was not necessarily quality of care, but how low-income women even access care. Because as we know, it's a very dramatic and often difficult. There are a lot of barriers for low-income women to access maternal health care. So I kind of changed the focus of my project to look at how to improve low-income women of color's access to maternal health care. So they're still related. I want ultimately to focus on access and quality of care, but I think at this stage, my focus is more on access. And I also think that through the fellowship, like Leela mentioned, the empathy interviews were really profound to me because instead of focusing on what researchers or policy advocates or doctors think, I really kind of reframed it and thought about low-income women of color, their stories, and what these communities feel that they need. Because, of course, my goal is to always make sure that any of my work is grounded in communities, and sometimes that gets lost. So that's where my project is at right now. I think one of the questions was maybe what part of the fellowship I've appreciated the most, or what has been most impactful. And so peer coaching is one of the things that I feel like I've really benefited from a lot. So at the fellowship retreat, we were split up into peer groups, peer coaching groups, based on geography primarily. But so since the retreat, I've met with my peer coaching group, I think on 2 occasions now, and we have another meeting tomorrow actually. But these conversations have really been like an aha moment for me because, we've been able to talk with each other in small groups about where we're at in our project, what challenges we're facing, if we're feeling discouraged in any way. And it really helps to have that supportive network of other fellows who are going through the same thing and who might be able to provide some insight and clarity and encouragement. So I've really appreciated that. And also at the retreat, we learned how to it was kind of a training on how to, like, best practices for peer coaching, and I thought that was wonderful. We learned how to listen and how to coach effectively. So those are skills that I think will carry on in other areas of my life, not just this fellowship. So one of the challenges that I faced, as Leela mentioned, is being vulnerable. That was one of the difficult yet fulfilling experiences from the first retreat, because most of my cohort, I didn't know most of the people that were in my cohort, and so we were really kind of immersed together to share this experience, and it really required that we kind of open up and be vulnerable and talk about our ideas without feeling judged or stupid or anything along those lines. So that was just a really it was a learning experience, of course, but I felt that by the end of the retreat, I felt very cleansed, I guess, from being able to just be vulnerable with people. Sometimes that's hard on a daily basis. And finally, I've really enjoyed this fellowship opportunity because, as Leela also mentioned, it's really encouraged me to think creatively. And it's kind of interesting because now that I've gone through this fellowship, I see how in other areas, even in my work, someone I work with was like, think creatively about this. And so I'm seeing this theme of creativity and thinking outside the box kind of bleed over into other areas of my life. And I really appreciate that. I'm also the type of person that is biased towards planning and like excessively planning and thinking about things, but this fellowship is kind of, it has a bias towards action. So it just kind of encourages us to act on our ideas rather than to nitpick or think or research so obsessively. So I will stop right there, but I've really enjoyed the fellowship experience so far, and I am happy to answer any questions as well.
We're able to have a lot of questions for you, so I'm going to turn that space over to them now, and we'll, oops, still can't hear me, huh? How's that? How about now? Okay, so it sounds like some of the participants can hear me. Oh, okay, great. So I'll just take a quick minute to repeat that for Mimi, since it sounds like she couldn't hear me. Just thank you so much again for speaking to your experience with such clarity. I have to say it's super heartening for me to see how it's landed for you all. And I'm so excited that you were able to share it with the folks on this webinar. So I'm going to turn it over to the participants to see if folks have questions. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Mimi and Mira now before we move on? There will also be time for questions at the end. But if you have anything specific to what you heard in their stories, feel free to ask. I see some folks typing, so we'll just give people a couple minutes to chew on that. So the question is, Leela and Mimi, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your experiences. I'm wondering how the Coraline Fellowship has supported you in finding support systems for yourself in your region. That's a great question. I hope that both of you can speak to it. And if not, I can also help to answer that question.
Sure, I can, or I can talk a little bit. So one of the great things about Coraline is like the networking opportunities. So I met so many people through this Coraline Fellowship that I didn't know, but we actually live and work in DC. So for example, one of the members of my peer coaching group, she's actually local here in Maryland. So I think that we're going to set up a time to go to coffee together and to talk more about our projects. And there are also, I think, at least a few other people in this area as well. So that's one of the opportunities.
I also wanted to add to that. I'm actually.
No, I'm good.
I'm sorry, Mimi. You cut out. I thought you were done.
No,
I wanted to add to that. That I think it is very it depends on what your region is. I think that one of the things that we got from the retreat was just to be able to observe where the activists are focused in, what areas are either misrepresented or overrepresented, and the South was underrepresented in our Coraline cohort. And I think that that's just not only Coraline, but I think that's just across the board in reproductive health. We're seeing underrepresentation in the Southern region. And so it was helpful for me to observe that within Coraline and then have the space to be able to voice those concerns. I think it was the first time where activists from around the country were talking about for me at least, the underrepresentation in the South. And then just having a network of people outside of the South too has been helpful. So even though there aren't people in Louisiana who I can reach out to, I feel like I have, lots of other friends in other places who I can reach out to, who share the same language and observations.
Hacking, and we'll see if it works. I will also say to that is, I can't hear you from them. I'm not sure why that is. How about now? Okay, it seems like maybe it's a connection that has to do with the presenters, that we're frequently not able to hear each other. But so far, I've been able to hear both Mimi and Leela pretty clearly. So I apologize to them because it seems like they're maybe not always capturing everything or catching everything I hear. To the participants on this webinar, thank you so much for your patience with our technological learning, if you will. I will also say that is the conversation about underrepresentation across areas of the United States that are not concentrated on the coast is an ongoing conversation for us. We do have regional field organizers in Tennessee, Oklahoma, and a lot of work is also being done in Ohio, but that is far from comprehensive in a lot of ways, and that's something that we are actively hoping to develop both as a part of our larger Coraline work and within the fellowships. So the thing that I think the fellowships have proven, though, is that each cohort has more diversity of experience and regional work than the one previous. So although Leela and Mimi's cohort is far from being, again, a really comprehensive look at the work that's being done in the South and in the central portions of the country, it is far more represented there than it was in the previous two cohorts, and our hope is that it will be even more represented going forward, both based on our work and to do that, and the fellows' work in really talking about their experiences and advertising it within their cohort as an opportunity for leaders in their networks where they live. Does that make sense for folks? And Leela and Mimi, do you think does that sort of capture it a little bit also? So again, I just want to express a lot of gratitude to them in their work of sharing their story and talking with other people about the fellowship, because I'm sure that hearing their experiences is far more inspiring than hearing me talk about the fellowship in a very broad general sense. So thank you again. I see a comment here. Jill says, for Mimi, I think you're right about how the health system treats people based on what health insurance coverage they have. This is a problem. Health treatment disparity is a terrible problem. Thank you for addressing it. I wish you success, and I appreciate your story about how you shift focus from quality to access. Thank you, Jill.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And does anyone else, Jim?
I think there was a question above for Leela, right? From Jill. Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go. For Leela, I love your idea of applying a futuristic vision to sexuality in order to liberate today's women from cultural constraints. Did you find that people respond to that type of visualization? Does it help you advance your message?
I think that what this process is helping me to do is find people who do share this vision with me. especially in sexuality education. We're so stuck on evidence-based programming, and you know, just we're stuck in the past is what my view is. And so it's not necessarily a very popular vision, but I think that just by me speaking out loud and speaking it, I'm speaking into reality, and I'm able to connect with people who do share that. So that's been helpful. And it's given me, I think, the empowerment to just even put it out there. Sometimes I feel crazy when I started talking to, negatively about evidence-based programming, or being not negatively, but being critical of it. I met a lot of resistance, and I think at this point I'm meeting more and more people who are willing to think critically about how we're doing things.
So another thank you. I see a question from Annie. It says, thank you both very much for sharing your experiences and why you are personally invested in the work you do. I'm wondering if you all have any advice on completing the application and how we can best ground and connect our interest in the fellowship to why we are personally drawn to our project. Do either of you have any thoughts on that?
I would say vulnerability. I was at a point when I filled this application out where I was willing to just be very real about my critiques in my own sector, and I felt like I really didn't have much to lose. So I was very I was very real about how I personally connected this to my work. Interview with the core line team, I was just really pleasantly surprised that they were able to absorb just where I was coming from and welcome just my critical thinking. And I don't know if anyone else is doing that, just like welcoming critical thinking. So I would just encourage you to be courageous and say exactly where you're coming from.
And to kind of piggyback on that, I would recommend not being so focused on the actual like project, or like a tangible project, but more like what is the issue that like inspires you or fires you, like makes you get fired up. Sorry, I'm having trouble speaking. So yeah, don't think so much about like, oh, I don't actually have like a project. If As long as there's something that you're passionate about, then I think that is a really good starting place.
I agree with that, and in the spirit of that, and also in the spirit of timeliness, I'm going to move us to the next question because it's about requirements for the application. But again, there will be room for more questions at the end. So again, for the requirements, we're looking for people who are curious and generous and generative. And by generative, we mean open both to generating lots of possibilities and solutions, and also open to hearing lots of possibilities and solutions, right? We're asking for people to lean into risk and discomfort, and that really comes through in the vulnerability conversation. We ask people to push their project ideas and themselves into a place where they're sort of asked to really be open and to really consider things differently from the way they may have approached it in the past. And that can be a really hard thing for folks. It can feel risky, it can feel uncomfortable, it can feel very, very far from the work that we do on in our lives and our day-to-day work. But what we found is that the folks who most take to the fellowship and who get the most out of it were really willing to lean into that, to really go forward with it, knowing that it's going to feel hard at some point, and trusting themselves to pull through that. So that's really what we're looking for. So again, that's going to require some self-awareness on all of your parts to figure out if that's something that feels comfortable for you at this time. But we hope that it is. Again, we have an idea or an inquiry ready for exploration, development, testing. We use the word prototyping a lot here. in service of the movement for reproductive health rights and justice. And so we know that the question asks you, what is your innovative idea? But your innovative idea could be a really complex, interesting look at a problem that you see surfacing, right? Like, what we want to see is your capacity for exploring things with nuance. It doesn't have to be, this is my project, I'm going to create a toolkit, and the toolkit's going to do this. That's one way to approach it, and maybe you can do that in a really compelling way. I know that I can't. And so what we really ask is for you to show us that you can see things from a lot of different perspectives, and you can see things with nuance and depth, and that the idea that you're looking at, that you're really dying to explore, has real complexity in it. And then lastly, we are asking for folks who are willing to experiment with and adapt their idea to the feedback they receive. And that feedback comes from your peers through our peer coaching model, and it also comes from the staff and the facilitators. Because we often find people don't have like an idea that's ready to go right at the bat. What we find is people have some like little seeds of an idea that they're really hoping to test out. And the more tied you are to one solution, the harder it is to really play around with it and see what else is possible. And so we're asking for folks who also, again, this is about self-awareness for yourself. We're asking for folks who are willing to experiment, who are willing to fail, who are willing to try again in service of serving the larger reproductive health rights and justice movement. So if you are someone who holds on to an idea and has a really hard time seeing around it, this may not be the right fellowship for you, but if you know that that's a thing that you do and you really want to figure out how to not do that, then this might be the right fellowship for you. So I would urge you all to consider that. Okay, so for the commitment, it's a 6-month program, and it's bookended by both retreat in the beginning, a 4-day retreat, Thursday to Sunday in the beginning, which we have the dates for. It's March 12th to the 15th of 2015, and a 4-day retreat in September 2015. I'll have the dates on the website very soon. We're just confirming things with the site that we'll be having it at. Just so you know, the retreats happen with 2 cohorts there simultaneously. So the cohort that is currently doing the fellowship, the Firebrand cohort, will be closing out their fellowship experience at the same time that this new cohort will be coming in. So that gives us an opportunity to do a little cross-cohort community building, and it also gives us an opportunity to provide more networking spaces. We also do monthly peer coaching with cohort members, and by we, I mean the fellows, not me. Although I am always available to provide support and guidance around that. But as far as I've been seeing with this particular lovely group of generative fellows, peer coaching has been something that I think folks really love and have been really committed to. And I think that's showing up in the ways that their work has been evolving, which is wonderful. We do webinars to give out more content and give people a space, again, to connect with each other between the 2 retreats. And we do one-on-one coaching both with me and with some of our design team. We ask you to consistently apply design thinking to advance your project. So again, really thinking about who are you trying to engage, how are you defining the problem, or how are they defining the problem? What are sort of a large list of possible solutions? What is one that you can test out? Can you test it out? What feedback do you get throughout that whole process? And what do you do with that feedback? That's how design thinking works, and we ask people to really commit to using it. And we found that when people do, it really opens up possibilities, not just in their project, but in their larger work. And then finally, we ask folks to create a final activity that communicates the fellowship experience. Most of the ideas that people have are not ideas that can be finished in 6 months. And we know that. We don't expect people to complete to have like a start to finish product at the end of 6 months, because these are really big, exciting, bold ideas. What we want for you to do in the 6 months that you're with us is really practice testing them out. Testing your assumptions the assumptions that underlie your ideas, testing what models of solutions really work for the people that you're trying to engage. That's what the 6 months are for. They're not for you to have one complete solution at the end of 6 months. So if you're picking a project that you feel like can't be contained in 6 months, that's okay. What we do ask, though, is that you are able to communicate your fellowship experience, either what you've learned in working with your communities, or what you've learned in working with the other fellows, or maybe some element of the process that has really resonated with you in terms of your development as an innovator. So that happens at the end of the 6 months. And then again, application requirements, you can find these all on the website as well, but we ask that you create a profile in the Coraline Network. You attach your resume, a story of your work on a previous project, a personal statement on your current idea, all of those things in one document. And we can accept docs, docx, PDF, whatever you feel comfortable with. The deadline to apply is next week. It's a week from today at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. That's on December 15th. And so my email is right here. You would send them all to me. And then we would begin the process of both reviewing and setting up interviews. More details on the application requirements are on the website. So, and I will put that website up at the end of the webinar. But in our last couple minutes, I just want to see if folks have any additional questions. We see some typing. What kind of previous project experience are you looking for? Okay, well, if you look at the website, I'm just going to pull it up on my screen so that I can see it. We ask you to really tell us a story about, excuse me, just give me 1 second. A previous project that you know, gives you a chance to talk about what it was like to come up with an idea, what it was like to put it into action, to tell us what like really worked, what didn't work, and what you learned about yourself in the process, right? That gives us some more details about your willingness to experiment, your comfort with discomfort, your experience with adaptability. It doesn't have to be the project that you're coming up with now. It doesn't have to be something that you did by yourself. It can be an idea that you worked with others or like collaboratively to put into action. But really, we're looking at other ways that you have done work in the past and the way that you talk about those experiences. Does that answer your question, Joe? Great. Does anybody else have any other questions? It doesn't just have to be about application requirements. If you have another question for Leela or Mimi. Okay. I don't see any more questions, but I will offer my information again for folks that may have questions that come up for them in the next week while they're preparing their application. I'm very responsive by email, so please do send me an email if you have a question, or of course visit our website. And if there are no final questions, I'm just going to take another minute to thank Mimi and Leela for sharing their fellowship experiences and their own stories with us. And to thank all of you participants for taking an hour out of your undoubtedly busy day to learn about the Generative Fellowship. I hope that you all consider applying. Oh, Danielle does have another question. Danielle, I'll encourage you to email me instead. And if it's specific to Mimi or Leela, I can also forward it to them. Yep. Thank you all. And again, just to eliminate confusion, the name says Chelsea, but my name is actually Poonam. We just shared this. We shared this particular webinar technology with someone named Chelsea. But for future reference, so there's no confusion about who you're contacting, my name's Poonam, and you will send all the application materials to me. No, totally okay, Jill, don't worry. Okay, well, thank you all again so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks.